Let's talk about money. One of the things that I've been working on in terms of getting our new website kind of up to date, and actually related to that very first vlog that we did here, which was about how I'm not emailing or reaching out to enough people, there was a bunch of stuff I wanted to get sorted out that I didn't have sorted out. And one of those was pricing. Because I was trying to figure out, how am I going to price stuff going forward? And what is the model going to be so that I can do small projects and still get paid? And that I can do big projects and get paid fairly. One of the things that I used to believe was that you should just charge everybody the same rate across the board, because I couldn't understand how people were figuring out how they could do a project for, say, Target at one price and a project for independent record label at another price, because you still had to do the work and you're still doing the same work. Now, I understood the logic that the work for Target has a much bigger audience and more visibility and is therefore potentially worth more to the client than the work for the indie record label, at the art gallery or whatever. I get that. But what I couldn't wrap my head around, how do you tell two people that what you're doing, which for me is identical, how do you tell people that that should cost different amounts of money? It didn't really make sense to me. So I knew that I had to have a model that was going to be different. And a couple of things had popped in my head. One was, I thought about what I talked about in yesterday's vlog, which is the unfairness of working on something like a book and only getting paid one time, despite the fact that your contribution helps sell that book in perpetuity, and that you deserve to be paid in perpetuity. And there's no reason not to. Everyone else involved in the book is. Why wouldn't you be? And then the other one was thinking about the way that ad agencies work or worked, which is that they get a percentage of the media buy. So they place the advertising and then they get paid a chunk of it. But one of the things that makes sense to me about that is the fact that there's this understanding that the work is being put into front of ever larger audiences, so therefore you should get paid more. It works more, or it works harder, and it's worth more to the client, because if it wasn't, they'd use someone else. So that's a couple things. And then the last thing I was thinking about was, when you're a designer, say you work on a campaign, you get paid the one time on the campaign. The photographer, though, licenses the work to the client. If the client wants to extend the usage of that work, they pay again. When I worked back in the day at a company, they had hired a fairly famous illustrator to work on a project, and they just wanted to reuse that artwork more or less the following year for this event. The design studio that did the original version of the work got paid once. The illustrator whose work was inside of that project got paid $19,000 to move stuff around in the Photoshop file for the reuse. $19,000 for an hour's worth of work, but really because they were paying for putting it into this thing and the fact that they could put this designer's name on the project. So as much money as that is, and not worth it, but whatever, that gets you thinking as a designer about business practices that are more fair than you being paid once despite your thing being used in perpetuity. I think a lot of times when they talk about the idea of the $1 million logo or whatever, you don't get paid $1 million for the work that you put into the logo. The reason you would get $1 million or whatever that number would be for a big rebrand or big corporate rebrand is because the thing that you're making is going to be used for years, potentially decades. Maybe it'll be dug out of the archives and used again 40 years from now. So That's what I would hope that's what those massive fees are for. Okay, so thing that I'm thinking about is for me to wrap my head around things, an hourly rate makes the most sense. And so what we have come to, and I'm not going to go into the specific rate because that's weird and gauche, but there's two rates. Rate number one is for hard conceptual work. So, or skill or non-commodifiable work. So if I'm doing, like I was working on a drawing for a project the other day, and that took, I actually didn't spend that long on it because I don't spend long on anything, but it took an hour. So that's at one rate. Then I had to spend 4 hours inking those drawings, which is low level enough work, at least the way that I draw, that I could do that while watching TV. So that work gets billed at another rate. So there's these two different rates. On the phone with the client, lower rate. Type-only layouts, higher rate. Versioning out graphics for like a simple format, like moving from one format to the other, lower rate. That's the idea. Now, I expect that most of the people that we work with, we won't actually send them bills. What I think that we will do is we will use those rates and historical job information to figure out the price of the project. And that's that. So my plan is everyone across the board pays those two rates. And that's it. Like, end of story. Whether you're nonprofit art center or Target, your project gets a foundation, gets built on that level. But the thing that you're using the artwork for figures into an additional set of fees. So if we're designing whatever, if we're designing a record, let's say, is the hourly rate, and that's the project. Depending on how many copies of the record, like how many physical copies you're printing, that might be the only fee, period. But if we already know that you're printing whatever, like you're doing like physically, I don't know, 2,000 copies or whatever it might be, 10,000. There will be what is essentially a royalty, like a licensing fee for using that artwork on between this amount and this amount of pieces. So if you want us to do social media graphics, at a certain number of followers, there might be no licensing. 1 million followers, there's a fee on top. Now, none of this is to like, with the idea of nickeling and diming people, but it's with the idea that the value of the work changes depending on the intended audience, which everyone understands, but it doesn't apply to graphic design. Unless I'm really stupid and know nothing about the field. I suppose that there's that possibility. But in general, graphic designers don't get reprint fees. No one consults you when somebody wants to redo your logo 10 years from now. People will ask you for your working files so that they can make changes to them, when the reality is they should have to pay you a fee to relinquish the rights to it. To be like, okay, you want to make changes? Cool. Here's the fee. The files are yours. You officially own them. The thing is, I love graphic design, and I want to continue to make a living doing it, and I want to do it in a way that makes sense and isn't stupid. And the facts are, the way that I've been doing it is fairly dumb, and as you get older and maybe you have more responsibilities, like you have children or something, or you realize like, oh, maybe I should actually save for a retirement or something like that, you have to stop having smaller clients because you need these bigger fees. The thing is, like, I want bigger fees, don't get me wrong, but I want to be able to do smaller projects and just be paid fairly for them. I want a process that's going to work, and that's one of the things about having these different processes. The typographer method in general is going to take a quarter to half as much time as the conceptor method of an equivalent project. So like a typographer method poster, it's probably going to take 25% of the time as a conceptor mode poster. Not that this would happen, but because it's not like somebody would get a quote for one and then be like, oh, I'll do the typographer method because I'm going to weasel out of the money. Because if you're doing above a certain print run, or depending on the usage, there are licensing fees. Essentially, I want to treat our work with the respect that photographers, illustrators, and filmmakers seem to know to treat their own work. So those are my thoughts on pricing right now. This is a new model for us, and we'll see where it goes. But I really don't want to feel like I'm getting screwed anymore, or that I'm making donations to people all the time. And I don't want to have to leave doing stuff that I want to be doing. Like, I want to be doing cool small projects, and I don't want to have to do it Robin Hood fashion, because that sucks. It's a pain in the ass. You have to work nights. You don't get to see your kids, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to fill my days with the stuff that matters and the stuff that's awesome. And so in my opinion, the way to do that is going to be to find a fair billing process, and then one that scales. That's the idea. The other thing is, by having multiple methods that work within different time frames, I think that we no longer have to discount jobs, which I'm excited about, because that's what we did for a long time. We said, like, okay, we could do this way. It'll be stressful, but we can do it. We can do it fast, and then we'll charge you this much. And instead, it's like, well, if I'm going to, like, I've already figured out, like, a lot of things are cheaper than I think they'll be, which is cool, because that means that what I want to happen has legs and it can work. Like, when I realized, like, oh, this would have only cost $2,000, I thought potentially it would cost $6,000. This is a good sign. Like, this means that switching out the process rather than doing a crappy version of the normal process, it can work. And that's the end of the video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them. I'm really interested in talking about this with people. So, peace out.